Ladies and gentlemen, imagine waking up one morning to hear that a leader from one of the most overlooked countries in the world has just announced a project so bold, so ambitious, and so defiant of global power structures that it shakes the foundations of international politics. Picture the headlines exploding across the globe. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the young leader of Burkina Faso, has declared the beginning of a monumental engineering project, a massive canal that will cut across landlocked terrain, opening the heart of West Africa to new waters, new trade, and a new destiny. But here is what truly stunned the world. This project will be financed, constructed, and executed without the West, without the IMF, without USAID, without the European Union, and without the very institutions that for decades have kept Africa chained in cycles of debt and dependency. It was an announcement that echoed like thunder not just across the Sahel, but across continents, sending shockwaves from Washington to Brussels, from Paris to Beijing, from Wall Street to every capital that has long treated Africa as a pawn in their economic chessboard. From the very beginning of his leadership, Ibrahim Traoré established himself as a figure unwilling to accept the status quo. He came to power not through hesitation, but through conviction, vowing to free Burkina Faso from the claws of neo-colonial influence. Yet, many in the international community dismissed him as a populist, a young firebrand with rhetoric louder than his reach. They did not believe he could marshal the resources, the technical knowledge, or the alliances necessary to carry out projects of genuine transformation. But now, in announcing the giant canal, Traoré has proven not only his intent, but his ability to translate vision into reality, turning bold declarations into infrastructural revolution. Consider for a moment what this canal means in practical terms. Burkina Faso is landlocked, historically disadvantaged by geography, reliant on costly routes through neighboring countries to export and import goods. For decades, this landlocked status was used as a justification for poverty, for dependency on foreign aid, for a sense of powerlessness in the global economy. But Traoré's project dares to rewrite this narrative. By building a canal that connects Burkina Faso to major regional waterways, he is effectively opening a door to the sea, a new lifeline for trade, agriculture, and sovereignty. The canal will not only reshape geography, it will reshape destiny. The announcement did not come lightly. Western institutions have long tied infrastructure funding in Africa to loans, conditionalities, and structural adjustments that strip nations of their autonomy. The IMF, for instance, has often dictated terms that forced African governments to cut spending on social services, privatize national assets, and prioritize debt repayment over development. USAID and the European Union, under the cloak of development aid, frequently pushed political agendas, inserting themselves into domestic governance under the guise of humanitarian partnership. Traoré's declaration to build without them is, therefore, more than economic. It is political defiance, a declaration of independence for the 21st century. It is an assertion that Africa will no longer beg for permission to develop, nor mortgage its future to the financiers of neocolonialism. Skeptics immediately asked, if not the West, then who? How could a poor, landlocked country like Burkina Faso, still grappling with security challenges, marshal the billions of dollars and the technical capacity to build something so monumental? The answer lies in a shift that has been quietly unfolding beneath the surface of global politics. Traoré, like other leaders of the New Africa Rising movement, is forging partnerships not based on subjugation, but on mutual interest. Nations across Africa are pooling resources, coordinating efforts under regional bodies, and attracting investment from new partners in the global South. Countries such as China and Russia, often demonized by Western media, have provided alternatives to IMF-style lending, offering infrastructure deals that prioritize development over conditionality. Moreover, African sovereign wealth funds, diaspora capital, and newly discovered natural resources are being channeled into projects that once seemed unimaginable. This canal, therefore, is not merely a Burkinabe project. It is a continental statement. The reaction from Western capitals was as swift as it was predictable. Washington raised alarms, claiming the Canal project could destabilize regional security or create unsustainable debt, though the irony of that warning was not lost on observers familiar with the IMF's record. Brussels warned of environmental concerns, a convenient excuse given the European Union's history of environmental disregard when it profited them. Paris, still reeling from its loss of influence in Burkina Faso after the removal of French troops, viewed the Canal as another sign that France's role in Africa is shrinking irreversibly. In contrast, across Africa, the announcement was met with applause, excitement, and inspiration. Leaders from Mali, Niger, and Guinea, themselves aligned with the new wave of sovereignty-driven governance, expressed solidarity and interest in linking their economies to this new waterway. For millions of ordinary Africans, it was a spark of hope, proof that the continent can dream big, build big, and refuse to bow before Western dictates. To understand the magnitude of this announcement, we must place it within the broader context of African history. For centuries, Africa's wealth in gold, diamonds, oil, and fertile land flowed outward, enriching Europe and later the West, while the continent itself remained impoverished. Infrastructure, when built, was designed not to serve African people, but to extract African resources. Railways led from mines to ports, not from villages to markets. Roads connected plantations to export terminals, not communities to hospitals or schools. The Canal project symbolizes a reversal of this paradigm. It is infrastructure for Africans, designed by Africans, serving Africans. It challenges the very logic of dependency and extraction that defined colonial and neo-colonial development. The scale of construction alone is staggering. Engineers envision a massive waterway, cutting across miles of terrain, requiring advanced dredging, lock systems, and irrigation technologies. The project will not only provide a transportation route, but also open new opportunities for agriculture, as canal systems can supply water to fields long plagued by drought. The Sahel, known for its arid challenges, could see a revival of farming and food security, reducing reliance on imported grain that has historically made countries vulnerable to global price shocks and Western manipulation. Moreover, the project is expected to generate tens of thousands of jobs, empowering local workers, engineers, and craftsmen to build their own future rather than watch foreign contractors reap the benefits. This is development as empowerment, not exploitation. Of course, critics argue that the risks are high. They question whether Burkina Faso has the stability to sustain such a venture, whether corruption could derail progress, whether financing from non-Western allies could still come with hidden strings attached. These are valid concerns, and Traore himself has acknowledged them, promising unprecedented transparency and regional cooperation to ensure that the canal remains a project of the people, not a new avenue for elites to enrich themselves. His commitment to accountability, if maintained, could set a precedent for future African megaprojects, showing that grand visions can be matched with responsible governance. The Canal project also highlights a deeper philosophical shift, the idea that Africa does not need to wait for validation from the West to act. For decades, African leaders were trained to believe that only by following the prescriptions of Western institutions could they achieve legitimacy. But Traore's message is different. Legitimacy comes from serving one's people, from listening to their needs, from building projects that elevate lives rather than drain national coffers. It is this spirit that resonates with so many young Africans today, a generation tired of watching their leaders compromise sovereignty in exchange for fleeting aid packages or exploitative trade deals. The canal is not just about water, it is about dignity. Internationally, the project is already shifting alliances. While the West criticizes and attempts to isolate, nations in Asia, the Middle East, and Latin America are extending hands of cooperation. These regions, themselves victims of past Western dominance, see in Traore's project a reflection of their own struggles and victories. For instance, when Latin American leaders defied the IMF in the early 2000s, they too faced scorn and skepticism. only to later achieve economic growth on their own terms. Asian infrastructure projects built outside Western influence have reshaped the global economy. Burkina Faso's Canal, though smaller in scale compared to China's Belt and Road, carries the same symbolic power, the assertion of an alternative path. The Western media, of course, has responded with cynicism. Articles paint Traore as reckless, a dreamer disconnected from reality, a populist who risks bankrupting his country. But those narratives miss the deeper truth. The West fears the canal not because it doubts the engineering, but because it threatens the monopoly of influence. If Burkina Faso succeeds in completing this canal without Western financing, it will prove to other nations that the IMF and its counterparts are not indispensable. It will embolden more African countries to reject aid with strings attached, to look inward and across the global South for partnerships, to build without permission. And once that domino effect begins, the power structures that have governed the global economy for decades will crumble. The canal is also a message to the African diaspora, millions of whom reside in Europe, America, and beyond. For years, they have watched from afar as their homelands struggled under the weight of underdevelopment and foreign control. Now, many are finding ways to contribute through investment, technology transfer, and advocacy. The canal offers a rallying point, a symbol of progress they can take pride in, an opportunity to return not as passive observers, but as active builders of Africa's new chapter. Already, diaspora communities are mobilizing to support Traoré's vision, raising funds and spreading awareness, ensuring that this is not just a national or continental effort, but a global one. What happens next is crucial. The canal project will face obstacles, from technical challenges to political sabotage, from financial hurdles to security threats. Yet, the mere act of announcing and beginning construction has already changed the narrative. Burkina Faso is no longer seen as a small, landlocked nation defined by its limitations, but as a pioneer defined by its audacity. Traore has, in effect, shifted the center of gravity, proving that even the so-called weakest nations can set the agenda, that sovereignty is not a gift to be granted but a right to be claimed. If completed, the canal will stand as a monument not only of engineering but of courage, a reminder to future generations that when Africa chose to build for itself, it shocked the world. And so, as we reflect on this announcement, we must recognize that history is being written in real time. Ibrahim Traoré's decision to build a giant canal without the West is not just about water, not just about trade, not just about Burkina Faso. It is about a world in transition, a global order in which the oppressed refuse to remain silent, in which nations once considered peripheral step to the center of the stage, in which Africa, after centuries of exploitation, begins to define its own destiny. The West may scoff, may resist, may even attempt to sabotage. But the idea has already taken root, and ideas, once born, are stronger than empires. This canal is more than concrete and water. It is the river of sovereignty flowing into the future. And whether the world is ready or not, that future is already unfolding before our eyes.